Mr. Benjamin Obi was a very rich man. His wealth was so great that people said it stretched as wide as the ocean. But deep inside, he was not happy. Years ago, he had trusted his business partner like a brother. Sadly, that man betrayed him, stole a fortune, and fled to Germany. From that day on, Mr. Benjamin believed the world was full of greed and lies. At 52, he sat alone in his grand mansion, feeling empty. He had houses, cars, and money in abundance, yet his heart was like a dry well. Betrayal had poisoned his trust. He wanted to know if there was still any honesty left in the world, or if everyone was corrupt. So, one night, he set a test. In his private study stood a heavy steel safe. That evening, he left its door slightly open. Inside were bundles of crisp naira notes, more money than most people in his village of Port Harcourt would ever see in a lifetime. On the floor, just outside the safe, he placed a single 500 naira note. Then he settled into his leather armchair, leaning back as though he had dozed off. His eyes were half closed, but he was wide awake, watching the door, waiting. Moments later, he heard the front door open. Caroline, his cleaner of 5 years, had arrived with her little daughter, Juliet. Caroline was a single mother who worked hard to provide for her child. Juliet was 6, a bright-eyed girl with plaited hair and a smile that could soften the Harmattan wind. She clutched her small doll, Kingsley, and skipped happily behind her mother. Caroline went straight to work in the living room, dusting the fine mahogany furniture. She hummed a soft Igbo tune as she cleaned, her movements graceful but firm. Juliet, curious as always, wandered quietly into the study. Her tiny footsteps made no sound on the marble floor. Mr. Benjamin's heart pounded. This is it, he thought. Juliet entered the room, her innocent eyes widening at the sight before her. She froze. The safe was open, its piles of money glowing under the light. She had never seen so much money before. Mr. Benjamin held his breath, certain she would run forward, grab a handful, or at least stare in wonder. He braced himself for disappointment. But what happened next shocked him. Juliet did not touch the money. She did not even step closer. Instead, her eyes spotted the small 500 naira note lying on the floor. She bent down, picked it up carefully, and placed it neatly back on top of the pile inside the safe. Then, with her tiny hands, she pushed the safe door shut. The click echoed in the quiet room, louder than thunder to Mr. Benjamin's ears. He sat frozen in his chair, stunned. He had expected greed. He had prepared himself for failure. But this little girl had chosen honesty when no one was watching. For the first time in many years, Mr. Benjamin felt something stir inside him. His heart, once heavy with distrust, was now beating with a strange, unfamiliar warmth. He needed to see more, to understand the true depth of the honesty he had witnessed. From that moment, he was no longer testing them. He was learning from them. Each evening soon became a quiet ritual for Mr. Benjamin. He found himself waiting for Caroline and Juliet, the way a dry, thirsty land waits for the first drop of rain after a long season of drought. To him, they were no longer just a cleaner and her daughter. They were a mirror, showing him the kind of world he had forgotten, honest, kind, and full of love. Yet one question troubled him. Was Juliet's honesty just a moment of chance, or was it truly who they were? The next morning, he could not stop thinking about the little girl and the 500 naira note. He paced around his sprawling compound, his mind restless. The test had been meant to prove his bitterness right, to confirm his belief that all people were corrupt. But Juliet's action had shattered that belief like glass. He wanted to see more. So, he called his head of security, a tall and loyal man named Caleb. Install a discreet camera in the living room, Mr. Benjamin instructed. But it must be for my eyes only. I want to observe, nothing more. That evening, Caroline and Juliet arrived as usual. Caroline, dressed in her simple gray cleaner's uniform, went straight to work, dusting the fine tables and sweeping the marble floor. Her movements were neat, quick, and full of quiet dignity. Juliet sat cross-legged on the floor, humming softly to herself as she played with Kingsley, her beloved doll. Every so often, she looked up at her mother with eyes full of love. From the monitor in his study, Mr. Benjamin watched carefully. After a while, he noticed Caroline pause. She sat down on a stool, resting her head against her hand, her face tired. Juliet noticed immediately. She dropped her doll, hurried to her mother, and began to rub her shoulders with her small hands. "Mommy, don't worry," Juliet whispered sweetly. "I will help you." She picked up a rag and started wiping the legs of the table. Her tiny hands moved carefully, copying her mother's work. Caroline smiled through her tiredness. She bent down, hugged Juliet tightly, and whispered, "My beautiful Juliet, you are my greatest treasure. Thank you." Juliet hugged her back and said softly, "I love you, Mommy." In his study, Mr. Benjamin turned off the monitor, his throat tight. His eyes glistened with tears he did not allow to fall. For years, betrayal had poisoned his heart. But now, through a child and her mother, he was witnessing something pure: love, honesty, and sacrifice. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. This was no longer about money or about catching greed. This was about character, about truth, about love. And deep inside, Mr. Benjamin knew his journey of learning from Caroline and Juliet had only just begun. Mr. Benjamin was now used to watching Caroline and Juliet every evening. Their visits had become the brightest part of his day. To him, they were no longer just a cleaner and her daughter. They were like a window into a world he thought had disappeared, a world of honesty, kindness, and love. But one evening, something happened that touched him more deeply than he expected. The front door opened as usual. Caroline walked in with her cleaning tools, but Juliet was different. Instead of skipping happily behind her mother, she ran into the house sobbing, her little body shaking with each cry. In her hands, she clutched the broken pieces of her beloved doll, Kingsley. The doll's head had snapped off completely, and for Juliet, it was as though her whole world had broken too. Caroline dropped her things and quickly knelt down, pulling Juliet into her arms. She wiped her daughter's tears with the edge of her wrapper and whispered, "Don't cry, my baby. Mama will find a way to fix him." In his study, Mr. Benjamin watched through the camera. His chest tightened as he saw the little girl's pain. He knew Caroline could not easily afford a new doll. And he also knew Juliet would never accept another one, because Kingsley was special. Quietly, Mr. Benjamin left his chair and walked to his private workshop. The room was filled with tools and gadgets from his many hobbies. He searched carefully until he found a small bottle of strong glue and a thin piece of wire. He also carried a clean cloth and a bowl of warm water from the kitchen. When he returned, he stood quietly in the shadows, waiting for the right moment. Juliet had stopped crying, but her eyes were still red. To distract herself, she picked up a rag and tried to help her mother dust the bookshelves. But her movements were slow and heavy. Her heart was still broken. Mr. Benjamin cleared his throat softly, making his presence known. Caroline and Juliet both jumped, startled. "Good evening, Caroline," he said gently. Then his eyes moved to Juliet. "And Juliet, what happened here?" He pointed to the broken doll in her hands. Juliet lowered her head, her lips trembling. "Sir, Kingsley is broken." "Let me see," Mr. Benjamin said, stretching out his hand. Slowly, Juliet placed the pieces into his palm. He looked at the broken doll, then at her tear-streaked face. In that moment, he saw more than a toy. He saw his own brokenness, his shattered trust, his wounded heart. Her pain was a reflection of his own. Mr. Benjamin walked to the reading table beside the bookshelf and sat down. Caroline and Juliet stood close, watching him with silent hope. With steady hands, he worked. He carefully applied the glue, slid the wire into the doll's neck, and pressed the head back into place. His movements were slow, precise, and filled with care, like the doll was the most important thing in the world. Finally, he lifted the doll and smiled. "There you go," he said softly. "Kingsley is all better now." Juliet's face lit up brighter than the morning sun. She grabbed the doll, hugged it tightly, and shouted, "Thank you, Mr. Benjamin. Thank you." Caroline's eyes filled with tears. She knelt and said in a trembling voice, "Sir, you didn't have to, but thank you so much." Mr. Benjamin smiled warmly. "It was nothing, Caroline. A man should always fix what is broken, no matter how small." But deep inside, he knew it was not just a doll he had fixed. That night, as he watched Juliet's joy, he realized something had changed within him. Repairing Kingsley had healed more than a toy. It had mended a piece of his own broken heart. The next morning, Mr. Benjamin sent for Caroline. She entered his study quietly, still dressed in her simple gray cleaner's uniform, her face filled with polite confusion. The large safe stood wide open again, its bundles of crisp Naira notes stacked neatly inside. Caroline's eyes flickered toward it, then quickly back to Mr. Benjamin. "Sir," she asked softly, "is everything all right?" Mr. Benjamin pointed to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit down, Caroline." She obeyed, sitting carefully, her hands folded in her lap. Her heart pounded with unease. Mr. Benjamin leaned forward, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "I want to tell you a story," he began. "It is about a man who had everything, money, houses, cars, but inside, he had nothing. One day, his closest friend betrayed him, stole a fortune, and ran away. From that day, the man lost all faith in people. He believed the world was full of lies. So, to prove himself right, he set a test. He left his safe wide open with a fortune inside, waiting for someone to fail." Caroline listened, her eyes fixed on him. She didn't speak, but her heart was beating faster with every word. Mr. Benjamin's voice softened. "Caroline, your daughter Juliet passed that test. Not only did she refuse to touch the money, she found a 500 Naira note on the floor and placed it back inside the safe. She made what was wrong, right. She showed me something I thought no longer existed, honesty." Caroline's lips trembled. A tear slid down her cheek. She pressed a hand to her chest and whispered, "So, Juliet is a good child." Mr. Benjamin shook his head gently. "No, Caroline. She is more than good. She is a mirror. Through her, I saw the man I used to be, someone who believed in truth and goodness. And through you, I saw a woman who, despite hardship, raised a child with a heart of gold." He rose, walked to the safe, and pulled out a thick bundle of cash. He placed it on the desk before her. Caroline gasped, her hands trembling. "Sir, no. I cannot take this. It is too much. I am only your cleaner." Mr. Benjamin smiled warmly. "Caroline, you are not only my cleaner. You and Juliet are part of my family now. This is not a gift. It is an investment. An investment in a future where honesty can grow again." Tears spilled freely down Caroline's face. She shook her head, overwhelmed. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Then let me say the rest," Mr. Benjamin replied gently. "I have already spoken to my lawyers. A new house is ready for you and Juliet. Juliet has been enrolled in one of the best schools in Lagos. And soon, a foundation will be launched, named after Juliet. A place to give children like her the chance to shine. And, Caroline, you will run it." Caroline's hands flew to her face as she sobbed. For years, she had scrubbed other people's floors, her life hidden in shadows. But now, light had found her. Mr. Benjamin smiled, his eyes glistening with true joy. "So, Caroline," he asked softly, "are you ready to help me find more Juliets in this world? Caroline sat frozen in Mr. Benjamin's study. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her chest. On the table before her lay the thick bundle of cash she had given her. Her hands shook as tears rolled down her cheeks. "Mr. Benjamin, I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This is too much. I am not worthy of it." Mr. Benjamin lifted his hand gently, stopping her words. His eyes were kind, but steady. "Caroline," he said slowly, "you are the most worthy person I have met in many years. This is not about what you have done for me. It is about what you and Juliet have given me. Hope. A reason to believe that honesty is still alive in this world. Please, stop doubting yourself. The lawyers are waiting. Your new life is waiting." Caroline covered her face with her palms and wept. For years she had walked silently in the shadows, scrubbing floors and dusting furniture. She had never dreamed of a moment like this. Beside her, Juliet had been standing quietly. She stepped forward, wrapped her tiny arms around Mr. Benjamin's leg, and looked up with her big innocent eyes. "Thank you for fixing my doll, Kingsley, sir," she whispered. Mr. Benjamin bent down, lifted her gently into his arms, and hugged her close. His voice was low, but filled with emotion. "And thank you, Juliet," he said softly, "for fixing me." Weeks turned into months, and soon the world saw the birth of something new, the Juliet's Heart Foundation. The tall building stood proudly in Banana Island, Lagos. Its walls were painted in bright colors, and every day the air rang with the sound of children's voices, singing, laughing, and learning. Caroline's transformation amazed everyone. She was no longer the quiet woman who bent over floors with a rag in hand. Now, she dressed smartly, spoke with confidence, and walked with her head high. Whenever she talked about the foundation, her voice carried passion and strength. She shared her story, how life had been difficult, how honesty had opened a new door, and people listened with admiration. The foundation was more than just a building. It became a lifeline. It gave out scholarships to poor children, provided uniforms and food, and offered a safe place to study. There were mentorship programs too, where older ones guided the younger ones, teaching them that honesty and hard work could open doors to a brighter future. Mr. Benjamin, though still the powerful man behind it all, surprised many. He was not just a sponsor. He visited often. Sometimes, his black car would pull up quietly, and he would step inside the center. He would sit among the children, listen to their stories, and pat their shoulders gently. His calm voice would reassure them, "You are special. You can be great." Juliet, now enrolled in one of the best schools in Lagos, blossomed. She studied hard and rose to the top of her class. But she never forgot where she came from. Every weekend, she returned to the foundation. She sat with the younger children, helped them with their homework, read stories to them, and even shared her snacks. The children adored her. To them, Juliet was not just a name on the signboard. She was a sister, a helper, and proof that one act of honesty could change everything. One hot afternoon, something unusual happened at the foundation. Toby, the security guard, walked into Caroline's office, holding a thin boy by the arm. His shirt was torn, his hair rough, and in his hands he clutched a worn-out book. His eyes were restless, a mixture of fear and defiance. "Madam," Toby said, "I caught this boy trying to steal from the library." Caroline looked at the boy carefully. He could not have been older than 11. His face was thin, his shoes dusty, but his eyes, though filled with fear, burned with a strange hunger. She gently took the book from his hands. It was an old copy of Things Fall Apart, its cover bent and faded. "Why did you take this?" she asked softly. The boy, whose name was Frank, lowered his gaze. His lips trembled as he whispered, "I only wanted to read. My family is poor. We don't have books at home. I didn't want to sell it. I just wanted to learn." Caroline's heart ached. She saw the desperation in his face. He was not a thief. He was just a child hungry for knowledge. She quickly called Mr. Benjamin, who arrived minutes later. He stepped into the office, his sharp eyes moving from Frank to Caroline. He said nothing, but the weight of his stare was clear. "This is your test, Caroline." Caroline knelt until she was at Frank's level. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Frank," she said firmly, yet kindly, "stealing is wrong. You must never do it again. But I understand why you did it. You want to learn, and that is a good thing. So let's make a deal. You can keep this book. And from today, you may come to our library every single day to read as many books as you want. But promise me one thing, you will never, ever steal again." Frank's eyes widened. He stared at her in disbelief. "Really? I can keep it? And I can come back?" "Yes," Caroline said with a smile through her tears. "But only if you promise me honesty." Tears spilled down Frank's cheeks as he nodded quickly. "I promise. I will never steal again." Mr. Benjamin, standing quietly by the door, felt his chest swell with pride. A deep smile spread across his face. In that moment, he realized something powerful. Caroline had passed her own test. The cleaner who once bent over floors was now the one teaching children about honesty, compassion, and second chances. He had once been a man who had everything but felt empty. Now, he was a man full of purpose. It was no longer the billions in his account that mattered. Not the houses. Not the cars. What truly mattered was this. He had found a family. He had found hope, and he had found a mission that would outlive him. Mr. Benjamin looked at Caroline, at Juliet, and at Frank. His heart whispered the truth. In the end, it was never about the money. It was always about the human heart. Did you enjoy this story? Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel, so you don't miss the next powerful story. Your support means so much. Thank you for watching.